Hey everyone, Margarita here. This is part 2 of the video that I just released pertaining to the timeline of the nonstop criminal harassment and agency and systems false reporting that my mother was doing all along the way for decades. I left off in the last video I did the last video on the 1980s all the way to 2002. And in this video, it's going to be 2002 to the current day because this is all still going on. Arrests need to be made immediately. There are so many people involved, it's out of control at this point. And the next video, I will release a list of the majority of the people involved and the agencies. Some of them I'm not going to release intentionally because I do need to talk to investigators and hand this information over to investigators. Some of it can't be made public yet. So I'm going to put the majority of the people on the list and the majority of the agencies. Some of it I might forget because there's just so much. But that's going to be the next video. Now, this is all criminal in nature. It's been nonstop my entire life. It traveled into being my teachers and all family and friends and anyone that ever knew my mother and her controlling the false narrative about me with all those people, and then traveled right into her using large systems and agencies around the time I turned 16 and going forward to the current day. So she used to threaten me before I was an adult. She would threaten me and tell me that she knows everything I do all the time, and she'd laugh like a deranged lunatic and how I'm never going to get away with anything. Basically how I'm never going to get to live my life because that's what's been going on all these decades. And she was doing that because she intended on paying people to insert themselves into my life, paying them to bring back information on me. She's done this with many places that I've worked at. She's done this with any situation where she can find an in where somebody can insert themselves into the situation or coincidentally already be there for whatever reason. So this has never stopped. It's literally gone on the entire time, which is why she laughed like a deranged lunatic all those decades ago, because she intended on carrying this on going forward. Now, when I moved into my first home, I thought that I was breaking all ties, cutting her loose. She was never going to be a part of my life. And I was just going to build success going forward. I just needed to be on my own because of the amount of harassment and crime she was committing. That I just knew that if I was alone, everything would be fine because I was already making really good money. I was already making over $1,000 a week, or about $1,000 a week from the time I was about 16 to 18 years old. And then going forward, I made even more money going forward. And I've always had real estate investments running in the background since I was 18. So I thought initially that's what I was doing. I had no clue how serious and large scale this all was. And it took about 10 years from there to really figure out how serious and large scale this had been. And then I uncovered more and more and more over the course of like from 2013 to the current day. So I had no clue like how serious it was. And these different incidences that she would cause, they would be more spaced apart that first 10 years. And then going forward, everything would it would happen closer together, everything she would cause. And then once I became injured in 2018, it became even more excessive. And then once my two older kids were approaching being adults, that's when it amplified even further, because that's how she fraudulently gained access to this stolen missing trust fund by portraying herself to have custody of and raise my older two kids. And once they were approaching 18, she was going to lose access. So at that point, everything amplified to an extreme degree because she needs me deemed mentally incompetent, incarcerated, or deceased. But at the point where we are today, the mentally incompetent thing, it isn't going to work due to numerous reasons. I've released all these videos. At this point, you can clearly see I'm not mentally incompetent. Everything I've been through in my actual life, what I've actually been doing in my real life, not the delusion she tells people, is the proof. Because of what I've achieved, even with all of the harassment and crimes against me, where I'm still at standing today after everything that's happened and after I've been financially wiped out down to nothing 3 times and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So it's very clear that I'm not mentally incompetent, and I never was. And if anybody looked into my life at any point, in reality of things, you would know that. But nobody ever took the time to do so. Everybody agreed to help her and participate in the crimes every step of the way. So where we are today, that's not going to happen going forward. So basically, they need me incarcerated or deceased to gain access to the rest of this stolen trust fund. And a lot of these people have taken payments from it as well. So she got the money fraudulently and was paying people along the way to keep it going so she could access it fully once I was taken out. So that's where the money came from to pay a lot of these people. Some of these people did not get paid. And they just agreed to help her for a sense of power or whatever the situation was. But I will release the names and everybody and the agencies in the next video. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to start where I left off in the last video. I left off in 2002, where she had already began trying to use the mental health system and the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department to paint me to look like I've always had this mental disorder or this drug problem or both. And it was basically, I don't think the mental, how she was trying to deem me mentally incompetent, because she had a mental evaluation done, and she threw it at me at one point before I even turned 18. So I don't think it went her way, which is why she threw it at me. But that's not saying she hasn't paid somebody to write a false report on me. I do believe there could be some false documents that state that, or possibly state that I can't take care of matters myself, or she could possibly have a fraudulent court order granting her power of attorney over me, or something along those lines, because of the amount of people and agencies who've been involved in all of this. It's very possible she has false documents stating any of those things about me, so she could get access to the trust fund. So that's never been real. If she's ever shown anybody any of that, none of that's ever been real. I've been on 100% on my own, self-made, self-built, all these decades since I was 18. So I'm not sure. There would have to be a federal agency to step in. Raids would have to happen. Many different departments and people would have to be detained in order to get to the bottom of all of that, if those exist. Now, I just believe it's possible because of everything that's gone on, especially in the recent 5 years or so. I do believe that that's possible, that it's a high possibility. Now, so in 2002 is where I left off in the last video. She was already using those two, the Brownstown Police and the mental health system. And also that year, so this was spring of 2002, she went to the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department with an empty sandwich bag that had the corners missing off of it, the ends. And she took it in there. They told her I was doing inhalants, and I was about 7 or 8 months pregnant. And so she did that. They told her that, and she's doing this to prove that the baby's going to come out all fucked up. And this is her proof. She's like, I don't think there's an actual report. I think it was just her delusionally going in there and them feeding off of each other and them telling her that. And she was doing it because she poisoned batches of food my entire life, and did so even more heavily during my pregnancy. Even though I worked in the restaurant industry and I wasn't eating a lot of the food at home, some of it I still ate, and it did cause a problem. So now that I know everything I know today, I was ingesting it during my pregnancy, which explains a lot of the issues that I had shortly after the baby was born and then going forward. So now I understand things fully, that 100% that was going on. And she was making that report to back up why this baby came out all fucked up. So it had nothing to do with inhalants. Whoever told her that's an idiot. I don't know what kind of cop told her that. But that's what they told her, and she believed it. I don't know if she actually believed it. She probably did. And then ran with it and kept telling people this in the background. All these people and agencies she kept the false narrative going with all these years. So what that was actually I was selling 10 and 20 sacks of weed, and the corners were ripped off of that bag because that's what the weed went in, and the remaining portion was just laying around in my room. And like I said, I never had any privacy. She went through my room all the time. So she didn't know what it was. And then the cops told her that's what it was. So it's not what it was at all. And at that time, people probably still do that today, but that's known that people do that. So I don't know who told her that was inhalants, but it wasn't. And going forward, I ended up moving into my own home when I was in labor with my oldest child in 2002. And immediately after the baby was born, CPS shows up at my house and tried to rip the door off my home. They had false information stating that I had not had prenatal care my entire pregnancy. They stated numerous things, and it was my mother who had fed the nurse practitioner a bunch of information about me, telling her how I was on all these drugs. She knew the lady personally because she worked in the medical system. She used to work in that building where the nurse practitioner was out of. And I ended up seeing the OB who parted ways out of that office during my pregnancy and opened her own practice. So that woman had nothing to do with my care going forward after a few months. And but my mother knew her long term. No, go. So my mother knew her long term, and the lady operated on everything she told her. And at one point, she even extorted me for my urine, basically telling me she's not going to give me a doctor's note without me giving it to her. and it was to run a drug test. So that's illegal. Her name was Isabel Raposo. Um, but then that information got put in my medical file. So then when CPS was called, they're operating on all this false information. And then I don't know who told them I didn't have medical care during my pregnancy, but I had care the whole time. I don't know if they were looking in the Medicaid system and they couldn't find anything because I wasn't on Medicaid. Like, I was still on my parents' insurance until I was about 20 because I stayed a student until I was 20. I went to Dorsey Business School and graduated there when I was 19. So I don't know I don't know where they were getting that information from, or if somebody told them that, or they just thought I should be on Medicaid because of my age and didn't look at the reality of my life and what I was building and what I had going on. So I'm not sure where it came from, but that statement followed all the way through the years of all the different false CPS reports along the way. And my mother intended on using CPS to get my kids in her possession all along. It was planned all along, which is why there's so many CPS harassment cases along the way. And that's how she was going to gain access to this trust fund. And then going forward, when she did finally fraudulently gain access, she was going to use them to gain access to the rest of it. So that was all orchestrated and planned. Now that went on because I didn't know my rights, and she made sure I didn't know my rights. So the lady should have never been able to come into my home. And she literally just opened the door and came in on her own, like fraudulently. It's basically a home invasion. And none of what was said to her was actually real. And because they had my mother's information, they then called her and she backed up all these delusions, told them I'm this mess, I'm this mental disorder drug addict, I shouldn't be having a baby, blah, blah, blah. I think she even told him my dad paid my bills at that house, which he had never did. I paid 100% of my bills the entire 6 years that I owned that house. I lived in it for 4.5 years, paid all the bills myself. So this woman was operating on everything she was feeding her. And I eventually got rid of them. But then a few months of me living in the house, we had a Halloween party, and the people there were a lot older than me because the person I was with was about 7 years older than me. So my oldest kid's dad, and then like his friends. But I'm like extremely intelligent, and I was always like advanced for my age all along, which is why I owned a home at 18 and had a good job at 16. So the people there were like between, I don't know, 4 and 8 years older than me. And so there was quite a few people there, maybe like 15 people or so. And two guys walk into this party, and we actually thought that because somebody there said they knew somebody that lived down the street and asked if they could come, and we said yeah. And because a car did not pull up at that time, and I had a lot of parking where my house was, and so you would see somebody pull up if they pulled up. These people did not have a car, so we assumed it was the people that the person had asked if they could come, because they walked in off the street. They walked in with 2 beers, unopened, 2 each in their hands each, unopened. And they never opened them the whole time they were there. They walked up to each person in my house and asked if they could buy weed, or if they could buy, I think they were asking for other stuff too. And nobody said yes. Like, nobody was selling anything, but we all had personal smoke. And that was everybody's response. And nobody was selling anything. So I don't know. Now looking back and everything that I know and what's all gone on, those people were paid by my mother. And that's where they came from. So it wasn't just some random people walking in. That is very strange, that whole situation that happened. But now I know that that's where they came from. I'm not sure exactly who they were. I don't remember their names because I didn't associate any of this with that incident until recently. So that's where they came from. They weren't able to carry out what they came to do. I don't know what they thought our response was going to be or what they thought they were going to do. They might have even been undercover cops. I'm not sure. But whatever they came to do, it didn't work because whatever they were told wasn't reality. So they left. And then in 2004, there was a Brownstown undercover detective who was following me around in Brownstown, and I was getting ready to go eat. And I had my oldest son with me, and he was like maybe 1.5. So this guy was basically just waiting for me to do something so he could walk up and arrest me and put charges on me. And that's exactly what happened. But because I had 2 Tylenol 3s in my pocket of my coat, I ended up getting a felony over this. And I never took them. I got them. Somebody gave them to me at work. And I didn't even know what pills were or what medication was because it was withheld from me my entire life. My mother made sure that I would always be in a continuous state of physical pain and suffering, along with mental and emotional pain and suffering my entire life. So I didn't even know I never even took a pill until I was probably like 23 or 24, once I was working a lot and I had a lot of extreme pain because I've always had scoliosis and I've always seen a chiropractor. So I never even took any pills prior to that, not even a Motrin or a Tylenol. So in 2004, they found these pills in my pocket, and that's why I never took them, because I really didn't know what they were or what they did. And because I forgot about them because I don't take them, and I ended up getting charged with a felony. But then also, the undercover detective made me sign a form to get out of jail that day, stating that I sell drugs and this and that, and that I use my car to sell drugs. And I do believe part of the reason for this is because my mother was telling him my dad bought me my car, my dad pays for it. And that's not reality. I've paid for all of my cars. And so I was the one making all the payments. It was truly my car. Both of our names were on it. And I believe it was to get that car taken from me because she was so jealous. So he made me sign a paper that was all fraudulent. It was a Friday evening, and I work all weekend, and that's where I make the majority of my money. And I'm in my own home with a mortgage and a baby. I don't get assistance. My kid's dad was already no longer working, and it was this is around the time he got thrown out of my house, and it was over. We were already broken up for about 6 months, but he was still in my house, and then he had recently lost his job, and from that point forward, he didn't work for about 10 years. So I was the one paying everything, and in order to go to work that weekend, I was forced to sign the paper. And then I had to tell my dad, and he ended up having to pay like $1,500 to get the car back, because none of it was real. None of what was stated in that paper, none of that is what was going on. And so that's what they were trying to do. But he's in on it. I believe he was one of the people in on it long term. I know he no longer works at the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department. I don't know if he's retired, but he was in on this long term. I'm not sure if he's in on it still today, but he was back then. And I believe that was Detective Grant. I think his name was Grant. So that's who did all that. And then so the fallout from that went on for like, I don't know, 8 to 12 months maybe. And by the time this all played out, and because they tried to charge me with a felony and it went downtown to Detroit, then I was on felony probation, and I was already pregnant with my daughter by the time all this played out in court. So I must have not got charged right away. It must have went on for some time, is what I'm thinking, because there was quite a big time difference in all that. So I got off probation right before I had my daughter, but the fallout from that went on for a long time. And you got to understand that I worked full time my entire life. So I worked like 50, 60 hours a week while my kids were young, like all the way until I became injured, or basically until I stopped working at Applebee's in 2012. And then I reduced the amount of time I was working, and I was only self-employed going forward, and I worked a lot less, but still produced the same amount of money. But prior to that, so those first 10 years, I worked like 50, 60 hours a week, and I always had a full-time job. Regardless if I had self-employment running at the same time, I've always had a full-time job and always worked more than 40 hours. So I had all that going on all the time, and then I always had my kids. So that's a lot of work in itself. So you have to understand that all the disruptions, all the harassment, all the chaos, and then with that situation, when my daughter was born, CPS shows up again. And there was a lady by the name of Courtney Villarreal from the Monroe County CPS agency, and she got the case to go to court on my mother's behalf. So now my mother's information is in the file from the previous incident a few years prior. And she's able to make it go to court. And it was all fraudulent. My mother told her I'm this mental disorder drug addict, always been, and my dad pays all my bills and all this stuff. So the lady believed everything she was saying. She gets the case to go to court. She tells them that my daughter's dad is married and I'm a homewrecker and I'm all these things. And they were actually already split up. They just got married at a really young age. They had 2 kids together. But she was already with somebody else and already had a baby with somebody else that was older than my daughter. And they never got back together after that. They had not been together in a long time. And so she's still with that guy today. So they have 3 kids together. Her and the new guy have 3 kids together. Her and my ex have 2 kids together from a long time ago. So, but the CPS lady painted it as if I destroyed somebody's marriage and I'm this hot mess. And then him and I went to court together when this all happened, and they pulled him on the other side of the courtroom with her, making it look like we were against each other, and he's there operating for her based on what my mother told her. And that wasn't the situation. We rode together that day. My kids were at his ex-wife's house. She was the one watching them so that nobody could find where they were. She was in a completely different county, and she had them kept safe somewhere else while all this was going on. We all used to work together. There was no problem. So She created this whole disaster, told this lady all these things. When I talked to the judge and I told him that I'd owned my home for 3 years, I own the home, I rent the land, and that I pay all my bills. I did get fired for being pregnant with my daughter at a Greek restaurant in Detroit where they didn't believe pregnant women should work, and I refused to stop working, so they fired me. And now there was a pending lawsuit, and I never got paid out of this, but there was a pending lawsuit at the time. But I always kept my bills paid 3 months ahead, and then I always have savings, and I always get my tax return, and I always had it as savings all along. So when I said all that, you could tell that I wasn't what was described and what she was trying to paint me as. And the case was dismissed. The judge threw it out of court, and then Courtney Villarreal cornered me in the hallway and said how she promised that she's going to be back for my kids. So you could tell that my mother truly believed that this woman's just going to bring her my kids, and she's going to keep making false reports until this woman brings her my kids so she can access this trust fund. So I didn't understand it at that time, like that's what this is actually all about, because I was living in so much chaos for so many years, and I was so extremely busy, and I had just assumed I was cutting all ties, and that she has nothing to do with my life. So I wasn't aware that in the background, my mother's doing this all from behind the scenes. She's never physically present. This isn't being told to me. I figured this out long term because this has been going on all along, still going on today. So then I eventually figured out what was actually going on. So, this was very secretive. Nobody realized that that's what was actually going on all those years for the first like 10 years or so. Then eventually, so then like 2 years go by almost, and I get pulled over in Monroe by a state cop, and it should have been a speeding ticket. And I had a brand new car, and because my car was brand new and I've always smoked weed, and it was so cold out, it was January, it was very cold. It smelled like weed from the night before, because I always smoke weed when I get off work, because I always work a lot and very much with my body. So my body always hurts, especially with having scoliosis and working that much. So it still smelled like weed. I still had my groceries in the trunk from the night before, so I took them out right before we left. And then we left, and of course my car smelled like weed. So once that all went to court, and it took like almost a year, they did not even charge me for about a year. And they were trying to say that I'm just so high or whatever based on the levels in my blood. And I said, you can't prove it's from that moment. And I had an attorney. The attorney didn't show up in court, and the prosecutor was like 90 years old. He ended up pushing forward with the case, and didn't didn't wait for a different attorney to step in, and then he forced me to go along with whatever he wanted to charge me with. And I kept saying, you can't charge me with that. And he was saying, oh, well, no, you have to plead guilty to either child endangerment or OWVI. So basically like a DUI. And I didn't understand at the time that if you ever got 2 DUIs on your record in 7 years, that like you just wouldn't have a license ever again. Like I never understood that. Or I didn't drink either. I wasn't really ever drinking. So, I mean, I never really thought about it. And because of that last situation with Courtney Villarreal and cornering me and promising she's coming back for my kids, I wasn't going to plead guilty to child endangerment because of all that. So those were all false allegations, false situations, all fabricated. Now there's this whole paper trail. And I knew she was going to try to come back for my kids, so I refused to plead guilty to that. So I pled guilty to a DUI that wasn't a DUI, that should have been a speeding ticket. And so going forward, that destroyed basically every aspect of my life going forward, because that's still a problem. The fallout of that is still going on today. The problems from that still going on today in 2026. That was 2007 when that happened. Now knowing what I know today, that should have never been allowed to occur in that manner. And then that was also, so Courtney Villarreal did show up at my house after that. And then I ended up, because I knew she was coming, so I kept all the blinds closed. I had a couple vehicles at this time. I had my new car. I still had the old one that I was driving too. And then because I got all new furniture at this time, I was working probably 60 hours a week, making almost 100. I was probably making 85 grand a year at this time in 2007. And I had all new furniture, so the old furniture was outside. So when she showed up, it actually looked like somebody had moved out. And she knew I owned the home. So I think she thought I moved out because I refused to answer the door. I told my kids, like, you have to be quiet if somebody knocks on the door. And they did. They listened to everything I said for some time before they started getting manipulated. And because of that, I ended up leaving the home with the bills paid 3 months ahead, ended up purchasing my home in Taylor, Michigan after that, and moved out of there. And then I rented the home out for about a year and a half to my daughter's dad and his cousin. And there was a problem with the mortgage on it. The mortgage company had messed up for several years, and the payment was supposed to go up, and they forgot to make it go up. I don't know if it was because the loan was sold or what. But by the time that all happened, they wanted 10,000 extra dollars, and I was no longer going to be living in the home or ever going back to it, and they couldn't afford to pay the difference. So we ended up walking away from that home and giving it back to the bank because of their mistake. And my mother told people that I lost the home to drugs. She told them I lost that home and my second home to drugs. None of that was real. So then I end up in my second home in 2007, and I didn't have any like police or CPS problems in that second home that I had for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. And um, it was the mortgage crisis is what happened. So I bought it at like the peak of when things were peaking, and then everything crashed right after I bought it. So I had a really high interest rate. There's all these issues. I had just convicted the bar owner's son of felonious assault that happened at my work at that time. In the middle of me purchasing this house, he was on steroids, and he committed numerous crimes. And there was a crime also with his son that was a minor, and the mom was charging him as well. So everything kind of went to court together, and he ended up doing about 4.5 years in prison. And that situation is actually public record. If you Google my legal name, it pops up right away. So I was coming out of all of this and just put in my new home. And then everything crashed, and I wasn't making the money that I was used to making. And I had just switched employers as well. And even though I had like two restaurant jobs, waitressing and bartending, it wasn't paying what it once did all those years I'd been in that industry. Because now I've been in this industry for like 8 years, 9 years. I'd been in it since I was 14, and I was like 23, almost 24. So like 9 years, and it was crashing. And that's when I became an entertainer as well, because I'm also self-employed. I can control when I work. I just had to find the right establishment. So then I did, and I continued on doing that, to the current day or whatever, and kept that as one of my streams of income, because I'm always able to control when I work or how much I make. And so that was how I was able to balance those excessive bills during the crash. And because I did so well with it, that I continued it as one of my streams of income along the way. And that's part of how I was able to build so fast as well, with everything I'm building, and the money I'm stacking, and like getting through the financial wipeouts and all the harassment that my mother's creating with all these systems and agencies. That's how I'm able to produce the money and keep everything going. It's like a key piece to like the glue holding everything together while I have other streams of income. And while I'm doing everything else, that was how I was able to accommodate all of the harassment and the excessive money it was costing me because of all the harassment and crimes. So I eventually walked away from the house because the mortgage company didn't want to work with me. They were refusing to reduce the interest rate because the interest rate was so high. It was like 9.25. That's very excessive. It should have never been that. The bank later got sued, and I didn't get the paperwork for this until like way further down the line. So I missed out on the money I should have gotten from it. But I ended up walking away from the home because of it, because I would have spent like 900 and some $1,000 on that small home in the long run. And then I realized these homes like mine were selling for like $15,000 to $30,000 at that time. Once everything crashed. So then I said, well, I'll just stack my money and I'll buy one with cash in a year. So that's what I began to do. But my mother told everybody I lost the home to drugs. And that's just not reality. So right away, I had the money. About a year later, had the money, started stacking up, started looking at homes regularly, driving my kids to school every day. They went to a charter school, my older two kids, so I drove them every day, picked them up. If I didn't pick them up, my dad did. My mother never drove them or picked them up their entire lives. And then I was also working for Applebee's from 2009 to 2012. So I would work some day shifts while they were there, and then like get off in time to go get them. And then I would also work self-employed at night. So when I was working at night, a lot of these times my kids were sleeping. It's not my mother had custody of them or she raised them or she's watching them. My dad did when this was going on. But you got to understand that they were sleeping the majority of the time that I was working at night. So, and then I had other people who would help watch my kids. I had like 3 teams of people who were also helping. They were not at my parents' house and that was it. I had numerous people helping me, and I ran things a certain way, and it worked for what I had going on. So they were not even there a lot of the time. And here she was telling people she had custody of them the whole time, and that was never reality. So when I walked away from my house, she told them I was homeless. She had custody of them, all these things. And then at some point in 2011, when I was again still looking at houses, and I'm still, have like numerous streams of income, but I was regularly looking at houses over by the airport in Michigan and then down in Toledo. And I was flying back and forth to South Florida, and I was looking at houses and condos in all of those areas. And one of the times I was gone, my oldest son's dad, his girlfriend, so she was very jealous of what she saw me building, the amount of money I was making. Them two had not worked in about 10 years. and they were mooching off people. There was numerous people they were mooching off of, and they saw an opportunity. Basically, they were kind of stewing and brewing from about 2011 to 2013. They were basically looking to kind of take from me and take my son from me, and then like get money from me is what they were trying to do. So in 2011, she was going through a divorce with her ex-husband. They were playing these games, and they were like using the court system to kind of go back and forth to get more money from them, and they're just playing all these games using CPS and such. Well, one of the times that happened, I was in Florida looking at a condo, looking at numerous condos, and some of the times I was down there, I was working. And at that point, CPS came because of whatever was going on with them, but my two kids were there. So that girl had two daughters, my daughter's age. So she was friends with them. And then my son's dad was with her. So he's the parent of the one child of mine. So this should have never traveled to where it did, but it turned into like my mother inserting herself in it, convincing them she's got custody of them. She raised them. I'm this hot mess running the streets, chasing men in different states and all these things, not any of reality of what I had going on. So that happened at that time. And then it turned into in 2000, let's see, in 2013, that's when they pulled the whole kidnapping thing and had kidnapped my son and not gave him back to me after he spent, I think it was supposed to be a weekend there. And then they refused to return him to me. And they saw like my businesses were becoming very successful. The two I had just started, plus I was still self-employed. I was no longer working for Applebee's, but I was making a lot of money and they knew it. And they were trying to basically get my son in their possession for this. And then separately, because they have no say-so over my daughter, that she doesn't have say-so anyway. They were not married. So now you got some loser who hasn't worked in 10 years trying to take my son, and he owes 33 grand in back child support at that time. And then this manipulative bitch who's been jealous of me trying to like take my kid, so they can get money from me is what it was. And they convinced my parents that they needed to take my daughter. So my mom, like her ears perked up, her eyes perked up. She, her bright bushy tail came along, and here she hired an attorney to steal my daughter. Well, because there's no grandparents' rights here in Michigan, they had to get my daughter's dad involved. And because he had two other kids and was in the child support system all these years, he was having so much money taken out of his check. He's never had a paycheck ever. Like his money was barely enough to even live off of. So when that happened, he jumped on it. And my mom told him, oh, you'll never have to pay child support again. Just sign this. So he signed it, didn't read any of it, that she hired an attorney who fabricated an entire false report on me, said I'm mentally unstable, I'm on all these drugs, and she raised my kids, and I'm running the streets chasing men in Ohio now. And so that's what happened at that time. It destroyed two of my businesses, cost me about 30 grand. I lost about 30 grand in cash. Still ready to cash out on a house. And then this escapade went on for about 5 months. So I've already made a video on this. It's labeled the 2013 escapade. So it goes in full detail about all of it. But the attorney my mother hired was out of Monroe, and her name was Jessica M. Richelo. And she worked for Bruce and Associates. And then they hired my son's dad, an attorney as well, because here they are feeding off each other all these delusions about me. They all just want my kids in their possession because my mother's got her own agenda to gain access to the stolen trust fund, and then this girl's got an agenda thinking she's going to get my kids so they can mooch off me and I'm going to pay them child support. So that's what was going on. And then my daughter's dad separately had all this child support. Of course, he doesn't want to pay child support. Of course, he's going to sign it without reading it. He doesn't. He signs things without reading them all the time. So that's what happened, and it caused like extreme financial wipeout. I then was wiped out down to nothing, and then I ended up having to get a new car because now she's got my car red flagged all over town, getting police to try to stop me, arrest me, pull me over and such. And so she had my car red flagged all over town. My car had been paid for some time. Like I bought a brand new car in 2006. It had been paid for. So then I need a new car because I can't even get my kids to school safely. So at the end of the whole 2013 escapade is how I got forced to work with my daughter's dad and how we ended up together in the first place, because there was never any talk of us ever being together. There was never any intention. He's not on the same page as me. He's not building anything. He's not going anywhere. I've been doing everything I've been doing as a single individual all these years. And in order to shut that whole escapade down and stop what was going on, I had to work with him. And that was how we cut my parents out of the situation who were controlling all of this. And then I think part of the reason is because he really does have a long-term drug use issue. I think part of it was to help her false narrative appear true, because then it looks like, so the person I'm with is like on these substances. So then it looks like I am, when that's not at all the situation. He's literally living in his own world, and was basically working against me the whole time. Like we were technically together, like he's working against me and everything I'm building and what's going on. So um, he became part of the problem, not part of the solution, shortly after we were able to cut my parents out of it. And now here I had to restack all my money back up to buy the next house with cash, and at the same time the housing market is on the rise. So now I'm working against the clock, and I've lost everything I've built and everything I've worked for repeatedly. So that was the third complete financial wipeout. And uh, it ends up turning into him taking a job with AT&T, but because he has so much child support coming out of his check, he basically couldn't contribute more than like $200 a week, like toward my household, when I make way more than that on my own. If he wasn't in the picture, I'd be able to make way more than that. So um, it turned into a situation where him taking that job basically just took from me. It basically removed the money from my pocket and put it into his own pocket at that time, because of the amount of child support going to the other mom. And it went on for a few years like that. It never balanced out. And then I ended up pregnant with my youngest child, and I didn't even know I was pregnant for some time. I had something called amniotic bands, which is extremely rare. It's like 1 in 14,000 pregnancies. And I ended up like having the baby. I didn't even find out I was pregnant until I was 14 or 15 weeks pregnant. End up having this baby, but I'm the one providing everything and building everything. So because I'm an entertainer, I had to stop working around 30 weeks pregnant. I stopped working, and I temporarily went to go work at the restaurant that caused our injuries in Taylor, Michigan, Little Daddy's. That's the place that had the carbon monoxide problem. That's what ended up causing my son's issues. Like once he was born, he's poisoned by carbon monoxide. We both had brain injuries during labor and delivery. I have videos up on all of that already. And that's how that happened. And then it got covered up. The hospital separately covered up that there was something wrong, didn't give us oxygen during labor and delivery, and it would have changed everything. And then we were left permanently injured going forward. And I never regained daily functioning or my life going forward. And down the line, even after I returned to being self employed, I ended up returning to the restaurant for 14 months of weekends only, and completely overloading with the carbon monoxide. So all during this time, here I was still trying to rebuild from the last wipeout, and I'm stacking, and I'm trying to stack as fast as I can, but my ex was working against me the whole time, and I'm not able to stack how I'd been my whole life because of his actions. And then eventually, when the money balanced out at his job, he still never like contributed more than what he was initially, and just ran off and was partying all the time and was never even home. And here I was fighting for my life all along. So there's videos up on this already on my channel, what all happened regarding that. But I did manage to buy this house in 2017, which should have been fully paid for in cash somewhere around 2014 or 2015 after rebuilding, but it should have been paid for prior to that 2013 escapade. So I did end up getting into this house, but now it has a mortgage because the mortgage rates were climbing at such a rapid rate that I wasn't able to like build fast enough with everybody working against me to get back to where I should have been. And so there is the mortgage on the house. Now, right after I moved in, about 6 months later is when I became overloaded with the carbon monoxide and completely incapacitated for the 3.5 years going forward. So the work I was doing on the house, the investment in the house, and because I should have been into the next home already, and this house should have been worked on and fully completed, and my life should have never stopped. This is all fallout from my mother's crimes and escapades. So, that got put on hold. I wasn't able to work at all for about 6 months, 5 or 6 months. I should have never been working. And if I hadn't done what I did as a self employed individual, my son and I would have never survived the injuries. We would have been deceased in 2019. And that's what my mother was going for. So at the same time that was all going on, here she was in the medical system preventing our treatment. She inserted herself physically and pulled aside Dr. Giratli in the building that she worked in the Dearborn location. And that lady entered false information in my medical file. So then when I was seeking treatment at the Trenton Beaumont, that false information is in there. There was 23 facilities and different times that we sought treatment. We were left for dead. We weren't going to survive, and she knew it. And that's what she was going for, so she could gain access to the rest of this trust fund. So the fallout from all that is still ongoing because we can't get help. We have ongoing effects from our injuries. And then I ended up, every time we were brought back, we're kicked out. We don't get help. We don't even attempt to go to the hospital. We can't. And then that's where I found the private center in 2019, where I then treated long-term with the hyperbaric oxygen chambers there, and I treated for 6 years. Half of that time was daily, and almost 200 grand of that was out of pocket. So almost 200 grand out of pocket, plus what my private insurance paid for on my behalf. My private insurance did pay for some of mine. They knew it was a work-related injury, and the place never paid. And they knew I was also paying out of pocket. But because of the crimes at the center, that place, because of that, they lost their doctor and they could no longer bill my insurance. So that's how everything became self-pay in the summer of 2021. These are the receipts for myself and my son. My son's is all cash pay, all self-pay. These are his with the paper clip, and then the big stack is mine. So that's all the self-pay. That's not including the insurance ones. So the insurance stack of papers is 75 pages, and there's about 40 or 50 treatments per page on that, on those documents on the insurance portion of it. So I have those as well. That's how much treatment we went through, and like I said, it's close to 200 grand out of pocket, and that's everything I had to pay for, and that was paid for in a 6-year period on top of me paying all my bills. Now, I know my mother's been lying to people that ever happened or the injury isn't real. Well, it is real, and that's why my private insurance paid for it. It was known right away what it was, and she's just been lying to everybody that the injury isn't real. So it is, and I lost all those years. Once I got moved into the house, lost all those years. Shortly after, about halfway through the injury, I'd say like maybe 2 years into the injury is when I hired, well, no, it was, yeah, 2 years into the injury, I hired Charmaine, and later that year is when she removed my ex from my home. She saw what was going on. She saw he had no intention of building with me. He wasn't on the same page, and he wasn't even in reality that an injury ever occurred or anything even happened to us. So because he was on so many substances and he was just in and out of the house pretending he paid all these bills that he didn't, he was just never here, and creating all these problems when he was here. So she threw him out, and he's never paid anything. There's no child support, nothing ever balanced out. It's literally the fallout of my mother's crimes and escapades from the 2013 escapade. And this is all what came out of it, because I should have never been in that building that caused our injuries. We should have never been forced to work together. This is not somebody I would ever be with in real life. But I was forced to work with him to get matters shut down. That was the only way to shut it down at that time. So this is what all came out of it. And now I have an additional child because I was not planning on having any more kids. And now that child's almost 10, and we're both permanently injured for the rest of our lives over it. So that was a very long-term issue that happened that came out of these escapades and the harassment and the crimes. And then going forward, there was many different sets of false information put in the medical system, in the files over that first like 14 months before I found the private center. Over me trying to seek treatment all those times, everybody was feeding off the last person's false information that each person kept adding to it. So there's quite a bit of false information in my medical records, but it initially stemmed from my mother pulling different people aside and stating things that were not real, telling them that my injuries aren't real. And then they entered into the file, which is how we were left for dead for so long and how our injuries became so extreme and so permanent. But because of the way the hospital system checks for carbon monoxide poisoning, it's not proper. You're not going to find it in somebody's blood. When they check, it's not being checked for properly. So when somebody's suffering to that extreme degree, especially with brain injuries, and then you can't talk or communicate properly, they're not going to find it. So they can draw the blood that's going to show a normal amount. You have to be pulled from a very high amount, and the blood has to be taken within like 30 to 60 minutes for there to be a high level detected. But the injury was so extreme because I had repeated poisonings, going in there repeatedly, initially giving birth while suffering from it, not knowing what was wrong, and then returning to the place because of that injury from giving birth while suffering from it, and then the place covering it up that that's even what happened. And it just going on and on and on until I completely overloaded and my brain swelled and broke through, and I was dead in my bed for 4 hours. So I have many videos up on all of that and all the times we tried to seek treatment, and then all these people entering all this false information, especially because the way the systems check for it is fraudulent. That's why we weren't getting help. We weren't getting treatment. So no, we would have never lived if I was not already self-employed, if I was not who I was. It's my own money and my own merits that saved our lives. And then we paid at the private center to get us to where we are today. Even though we're still up permanently injured, we wouldn't have survived past 2019. We would have suffered a long, slow, painful death is what it would have been. And we were very close when we found the center. So there's many videos up on that already. But in 2018, shortly after I bought this house, there was a private investigator who was sitting out front of my house, or maybe he's not even a real private investigator. Now I realize my mother had paid him. She hired him. He was sitting out front, watching me for some time. And Um, I want to say it was about 2 weeks. And then he ended up following me to a gas station when I worked down in Ohio, and he followed me, and I should have never been working. I was barely standing, barely able to get from point A to B at this time. He approached me at a gas station, asked for directions. I gave him wrong directions in the opposite direction, and then he showed up at my work. And then I realized he was there watching me. So I initially thought he was hired by the place who caused the injuries, but he was actually paid by my mother. So now that I'm looking back over everything, my mother invited herself to my house around that same time frame, shortly before that, and it was my dad who brought her here, and she's never been allowed in any of my houses. So she kind of roamed around my yard, and she was like fishing for information and looking around different things, and um, like just snooping for any type of information she could get. So then I realized that the whole time I lived here, she's had people watching me, sitting across the street watching me, basically the whole time I've lived here, and long enough to pick up on like my patterns in life, and what's going on around me type thing. And because I was incapacitated the first 3 years, I wasn't really going far. I really wasn't. I was only going to treatment and back. And shortly before COVID, I only worked a couple handfuls of times in back before COVID, and I got the full COVID pay for 16 months before returning to work. That's how I got recovered. All that out of pocket treatment, all my insurance was still being billed at that time, and all the treatments I went daily for all that time. That's how I got to somewhat return to like halfway to where I used to be without being so close to death. So that whole time, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were just wasting their time because I was literally incapacitated. I wasn't really going too many places. And but she was picking up on behavior patterns and everything going on around me by getting people to sit out front. So now I'm realizing even further more of what's been going on. I have not talked about some of this yet. There's a whole other situation I've not even talked about yet. But there's about 20 people involved in the other situation. I will get there in its own video, or it's probably going to take numerous videos because it went on for like 2.5 years. But she was able to get more people to insert themselves into my life. And once I returned to work from COVID, it became very accelerated, and there was just numerous of them. And then there was like many brought in. Maybe it didn't work out because they weren't able to like do what I do or work where I work, and so some of these people didn't work out. They only came like a few times and never seen them again. But there was many people involved in this. And now I realize it was from her coming to my house in 2018, kind of gathering some information, getting people to sit out front and watch me for years on end. And then it turned into many people inserting themselves into my life. It was literally about 20 people. I don't even have most of their names. But I could describe them, or if I seen them, I could point them out. So I will get there. It's a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about it in this video, because it went on for so long and there's just so many people. But now I realize it was going on from 2018 going forward. And the point was to cause disturbances in my life, to get me to eventually either not be able to work, to pay my bills, or to like get me forced from my home, or just cause inconveniences all around. And so now I'm realizing what's actually going on. And one of those people was hired and paid to become me. This person was hired and paid to take over my life to become me, literally. So now I even have more information today. I even gathered more information the last few weeks. Now I know, and I have some more further proof that backs that up. And there is a police video from a few years ago down in Ohio, which will also back this up, because there was numerous officers who were called in to see what I was saying, and they were able to verify this. And so there's a whole thing that happened a few years ago. So I'm going to try to also get that evidence if I can, in the body cam footage, because you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Now, so that the people, once I went back to work after COVID in 2021, the people following me around work never stopped. It continued from that day forward. And even when I stopped working in Ohio, so these people were paid to make sure I'd get like booted from my place of like where I was making my money, because I don't work for them. But there was 2 establishments I'd regularly work at. I'd also worked at those places years ago as well. And they were basically paid to make sure something would happen to where I wouldn't be able to work there anymore. That's why so many people were brought into it. So they could gang up on me and like cause problems. And it looks like I'm the problem when I'm not. And that went on for some time. And then after I left Ohio, more of those people also followed me immediately. Immediately. The first second I was at any other establishment in Michigan, those people followed me there as well. So I went to numerous spots in Michigan from that day to this day. And those people, there was some of those people were at any of the ones I've been at, they were at, except for one. But so that all happened. that there's a long-term fallout. There's many issues. I do believe that person that was paid to become me, she was doing so because they intended on her helping gain access to the trust fund, portraying herself to be me, and her presenting as me, and like possibly with my mother. Now I don't know how my mother knows any of these people, because if you watch the video where I talk about she's paid people to follow me for years or insert themselves into my life. One of the guys I went out with during that time when I was gathering this information and figuring it out, I realized the two of these people were connected, but I couldn't initially prove it. And I eventually did, because then I caught them talking at one point. I couldn't even prove they knew each other. And then at one point I was able to prove it. So now this girl has a baby. And I believe they're using this baby to pretend to be me, because she has actually turned herself into me. And they're using her to try to access this trust fund as if that's her baby, or maybe my mother's using the baby, or it's the two of them, I believe. But that baby is actually that guy's baby, that guy who was like being paid to insert himself into my life. I only went out with him those couple times just to gather the information. And then I just like stopped talking to him altogether, and he couldn't figure out why. But he did show up at my work numerous times down the line. But I now realize that that baby is actually that guy's baby. So this person is presenting herself as me all over the internet, or as herself, as her real self. And I believe she, like, whoever her social media is operating by like a different name, but she has one with her real name, and it's got the this guy who is supposedly the father of the baby in the picture, but it doesn't show his face. It's just a staged social media page just to look like that's her real life and her real family, but she's actually in on this organized crime with this group down in Ohio. And that guy is the father of the baby, and they're actually together in real life behind the scenes. And then there's like a whole group of like 20 individuals, and they have their own separate criminal ring down in Ohio. And somehow the criminal ring my mother is affiliated with here in Michigan, with all the different officials, those people brought in the people in Ohio who started all this in my life years ago. They are connected. So I don't know who the connecting person is, but the groups are connected. And I promise I will find the link at some point. So I am very close to having all of that. It took me a very long time to put all this together. And some of them I have pictures of their vehicles. But I also got a phone stolen during all this at my work at one point. So I lost some of the evidence I did have. There's a lot. I know this video is very long. I did not want it to be long, but I know there's no way to really tell it, because this harassment and the crimes have been nonstop my entire life. So coming out of all that, at the end of me finishing up working in Ohio, so this was probably the end of 2023. That's when the damage to my house happened, and I stopped working the way I was all those years, because it took 2 years of work on this house, and I had to do a lot of it myself. So that's what I've been working on the past 25 months. And so all those people that were following me around, they don't have access to me. Nobody has access to me, because of where I've been doing all of my work and what's all been going on. That's why there's so many random people who have been reaching out to me the past like year and a half, because nobody's been able to get access to me, because I haven't been leaving my house the way I normally do, or working my regular schedule the way I have all my life. So that's another issue. But the damage to the home like plays a role in all that. Now, the damage to the home happened in 2023 also, and it happened due to the Ford gas bill in 2021. So I have videos up on that already. So if you watch those videos, my mother inserted herself in that. This is shortly after I returned to work after COVID. That happened, and Ford was paying for our hotel for 2 months, and then she inserted herself in it and got them to cut our hotel off, telling them my son and I were never injured. I'm lying about us having the injuries we have, or being able to be in the home. And they cut our hotel off on the delusion she told them, and it was so that way I wouldn't survive, because I almost didn't survive. There was many times I almost didn't make it, and that was her intent, because then she'd get access to the trust fund. That's the whole point. So that all happened. And because of that, it took 2 years for the area to actually clear, for my house to actually clear from those particles. And I knew it based on how fast it was dissipating naturally with rain, because they only flushed it to a certain degree. It was not actually all clear at any time. EPA's level of all clear is not all clear. And because of that, I had to purchase my home in Ohio so we could breathe clean air, because we were living with our brains bleeding in and out of consciousness the whole time. So because that happened, that's how I ended up at my house in Ohio for a little over a year. And that's how the damage to my house was done at the end of 2023 while I was gone. There should have never been anybody put in my home. There shouldn't have been a tenant in my home. This house already had future plans. The work was almost done initially in 2022, 2021 and 2022. The work was almost done. So that's what happened during that. That's how the damage happened. And then there was more police corruption and problems with the city, because all those people took my mother's delusional phone calls during the Ford spill. They thought it was a joke that like that I'm really not injured. I'm just saying all this stuff about the gas bill. And it is reality. There's documentation all along the way because Charmaine watched me go through everything I went through, watched me nearly pass out in her office numerous times. So that all happened. Because I couldn't make police reports, and Sergeant Matthew Wilchinski's over here threatening to falsely arrest me some more out of Flat Rock. While all that was going on, and I was trying to make a police report on her doing the damage because it was criminal negligence. She left her kids home alone, and they left the water running and or overnight, and that's what caused the majority of the water damage. And there was additional damage. And then she also threw away the 2 insurance checks. But I couldn't report any of this to the police because Sergeant Matthew Wilchinski was refusing to take the report and threatening to falsely arrest me some more, as he did in 2021, where I was significantly re-injured and dragged from my home because my mother had been calling my city's police department the entire time I've owned this home, telling them this is my baby daddy's home. I don't pay the bills here. I'm a mental disorder drug addict. He pays all the bills. This is his house. And I was dragged from my home and significantly re-injured after my head got cracked off the garage floor and then exposed to a lot of carbon monoxide. I still haven't returned from that day, but he's responsible for that incident. And so that's also part of the reason I was forced away during the gas bill, because my brain tissue, it took many years and all those treatments to seal it shut to get me to where I was when that happened. And then because of the re-injury and the amount of brain tissue that got re-destroyed, not all the way, but enough to where it was a problem, and we had to leave after the spill and then take the time and then come back. So all of it is tied together why all those things happen. Also, during the extreme part of my injury from 2018 to 2021, CPS had showed up here many times, many times during that time frame as well. I don't have the reports on that because it all kind of happened after I ordered the stack of reports, so I don't have those in hand, but they did show up here. They just were not able to ever make their way in. It was my mother behind the scenes causing that as well. During the extreme part of my injury, telling them, oh, I've got this mental disorder, I can't take care of my kids. No, I was in a fight for my life, being left for dead with no help from the medical system, and she's also causing that in the background. So that all happened at the same time this was all going on. And then now, separately, my oldest son has been manipulated by his paternal grandmother long term, and she saw like what I was building along the way, how successful I've been, and what I was teaching him to do. So at the end of 2020, she snatched him for herself, and it's caused long-term problems and fallout that are still going on today. Now she's been removed from the picture permanently, but there's still an issue, and until my mother's apprehended, it's going to continue to be an issue. Because it's destroyed everything I worked getting him in line. Because he has high functioning autism, he took a lot of extra time and work, and I didn't become injured till he was about 14 or 15. So all the years of work I put in have been reversed regarding that. Those are still issues, and now my mother is an issue with that as well. So this is all kind of going on at the same time. And also during the 2021 gas bill leading up to the end of 2023 where the damage happened, my mother had been calling my city and the police department both along the way throughout the course of all this, telling them I couldn't afford my home, and that's why the tenant was in my home, and I'm going to have all these problems. And when the damage happened and she caught wind of it, she then started calling even more, telling them, oh, well, it's my fault because I'm just so mentally disordered and dumb and I couldn't afford my home, and that's why there was a tenant in it. So they believed her initially when they cut my hotel off, acting like my injuries aren't my injuries, because the police had been here many times throughout the course of my injuries. There's many phone calls. I don't have the reports right now because they want almost $500 for those reports. So I don't have the reports currently, but there was many police phone calls, and she continued on with that false narrative the whole time from the gas spill to the end of the time the damage happened, telling them like, and they all just believe her. Everybody at the city believes her. They all know who I am. I've never even met half these people. But that's not all what's going on. She's the one who caused the injury. Her delusional phone calls caused the re-injury. The police department caused the re-injury. And then why I had to leave my home. The injuries are very real. They are that severe. We were living with our brains bleeding the whole time. It took 2 full years for those particles to clear up out of my house. And so when the damage happened, there was all these additional problems and harassment regarding that. I'm just telling people I've never been able to afford my house. Other people pay my bills. None of that's ever been real. She's caused every problem behind the scenes by placing all these delusional phone calls. So the injuries tied into it, all the problems, all the delusion repeating, all the screaming going on in my house, every step of the way, every problem I've just said at the root, she's behind the scenes causing all these problems with her delusional phone call placing and causing other individuals to insert themselves into my life and or agencies to show up at my house and harass me. All of it's been going on. She's at the root of every single one of these situations. So now I've been back in the home 2 years, haven't talked to anybody from the city or the police department, but I also can't make reports or, any of what's been going on. I haven't been able to make reports the entire time, all due to those delusional phone calls. At no time could I ever not afford my house. Those are delusions. Now, at some point in 2021, my mother also called so during the gas leak, this is when she was able to kidnap my daughter, who was 16 at the time. Um, she called them and told them that she was going to need assistance because I'm mentally unstable with the gun and that I've threatened them before with it and I'm coming to pick up my daughter. And so that I do have that report in print. However, just prior to that, my daughter had stolen my mortgage payment, and I think it got stolen in Ohio. But then didn't notice till I got back to Flat Rock. And since my legal address is in Flat Rock and I live in Flat Rock, I went to the Flat Rock Police Department, and they refused to go get her or look for the money. And in the background, my mother had also called them in advance at the same time she called Brownstown, and she stated that I'm a broke mental disorder, drug addict, loser. I would never have that kind of money. Other people pay my bills. I'm lying about the whole thing. My daughter didn't steal any money. And this all came out of her mouth. So this got verified in Charmaine's office a few days after this, after all this happened. And so this came out that she placed both of these delusional phone calls to both of these cities' police departments. So they, when I tried to report the stolen money, it was $1,563. They took my book where I had my money. The stack was this big. I also had $1,000 and $100 bills tucked in the side, so it's like this big. They said, you have $1,000 right here. I said, I'm not talking about that money. The money that was stolen is a stack this big. It can't be missed. But because they didn't believe my reality, they refused to do anything about it. They believed my mother's delusional phone call. Let my daughter run free. I then went to Brownstown, tried to get her back. So I've already released videos on all this. That's when all this happened. Where I talk about Brownstown Police Department is responsible for my daughter staying truant for a year and a half and being kidnapped. They allowed her to stay at my parents' house. They believe she had custody all these years, that she raised her. That's her home, and that's not reality. Those are delusions. So from that point forward, she stayed truant. She never returned to school. And all these police departments participated in this. So those videos are already up. You can go watch those. That created further problems, further fallout down the line, because now I have no support system. So this is another thing she's been trying to do. She repeats delusions to people around me, so that way I don't have a support system. I don't have people to turn to or help me. And then here I was fighting for my life for several years, like 3 to 4 years solidly. And she was doing that to make sure I wouldn't have anybody to watch my son so that I could treat, so that way I wouldn't survive. And then at that time, when my daughter kept getting like taken by my mother and repeated delusions too and causing all these problems, some of her friends did help me. And then I had a lady working for me from like spring of 2021 to like the end of summer of 2022. And then my cousin worked for me and helped me from that time in 2022 to the end of 2023. So all that went on, and I didn't have. She was basically, they were making sure I didn't have a support system, that everybody turned against me, and then my daughter wouldn't be helping me. And now to this day, she's still not graduated due to all of that. Um, Now, and that gun call to the Brownstown Police Department, I actually believe that was my dad that called. My mother got him to place that delusional call, because you can also see the video that I released. It's Brownstown Police video number 3 from about a year ago. You can see what he's telling the cops, that like he's telling him my mother's delusions in the video. So I actually believe he placed the call, because it says he on the sheet, but those are her delusions. So I don't know how she's able to make these delusions come out of his mouth. She just repeats them to him, and it's been going on my entire life, and it's still going on today. So she repeats so many delusions, she's able to make it come out of other people's mouths. This is also the part of the reason Charmaine was brought in at the beginning of 2020 to watch all of this happen, because she has physically seen all this with her own 2 eyes, with my dad operating on my mother's delusions. My mother calls regularly and tells on herself, and then my daughter as well. So she has physically seen all of this. This is not me coming and telling her stuff. She's actually seen all this with her 2 eyes and with her ears of my mother telling on herself for these crimes. So that's still going on in the current day, except for at some point she realized what Charmaine was hired for, and she stopped calling her as frequently. She thought Charmaine was operating for her and going to peg me as mentally unstable, so she could get access to the trust fund. And then when she realized that's not what was going on, and Charmaine saw from the very beginning what was going on, she stopped calling her. So it was several years in by the time that happened. But so this went on for some time, where she was able to see that this is what my mother's been doing. So now there's proof of all of this, all along the way, all these delusions, all these delusional phone calls, manipulating every person, every agency. Now she's got proof of it because she saw it. And then my mother told on herself for doing all this. Now, Also, at that same time the gas leak happened, that was when the attempted murder happened. I also released a video on that where she thought I was in my chamber and turned on her gas stove, where I would have been deceased at that time with how severely injured I was at that time when all that happened. That was her intent. That's why she took my son by the hand and walked outside with him, knowing that we are that sick and injured, because she wanted him to survive. Because then she has this delusionary frame of mind regarding my youngest child. Even though there's never been a relationship or contact, she believes that if something happens to me, that child um, is given to her. She believes that my youngest child goes to her if something were to happen to me, and that's just not reality. He owns my home with me. He stays with my home, and he stays with whoever I designate stay with him, and the home gets paid off with the life insurance. So she's very delusionary on her frame of mind regarding my son, which is why she did that day, because she wasn't living in reality about how I have things already set up if something does happen to me. So that's just not how things go. There's other people already in place who are mentally stable who can take care of him. So that's how it's going to go. They would just move into the home with him, and he would own the whole thing, and it would be paid off. So she's delusional in that sense, in that matter. And that's been ongoing numerous times as well, thinking she's going to get her hands on my youngest child. That's never happening. And then also during that gas leak in 2022, and then traveling into 2023, while my daughter stayed kidnapped all that time, that's where the Monroe County front of the court became involved, and Catherine Scott began taking my mother's delusional phone calls, writing false court reports on the situation based on my mother's delusional phone calls, not believing any of reality. And then she also helped participate in the crime. So I also recently released an entire video regarding that matter. You can go and view that. That was happening. It went on for over a year, from 2022 to 2023. And then in August of 2022 is when I was also set up to be arrested in Monroe. So that's where I also released that video recently with Bello Bazzi, and the fraudulent setup to be pulled over for a DUI. So that's how all that started. I already released videos on that, and then the fallout from that is ongoing for a long time. So the fallout of everything goes on for years. So once 2018 happened, all the fallout of all my mother's crimes and harassment, they all go on for years. And because they all go on for years, everything's going on at the same time. So this is what I've been forced to deal with. There's no way to live a life. There's no, and I'm chronically sick, permanently injured, still treating to this day. Can't have exposures, can't go out and about in the world like a regular person during all of this. And this is still going on today. And the fallout of all these is still going on today. So she's been, so from 2018 to the current day, she's managed to pull all this off to an extreme degree, where I've spent the last 8 years picking up the pieces to the fallout and the harassment, and it just keeps going on and on and on, and more situations happen, but she's at the root of every single one of them. And that's kind of how it's gotten to where it is today, where I said my life has stopped and I'm backed into a corner. This is why. So also during 2022, that's where she signed the false documentation with the kid's orthodontist. She had been calling that woman, claiming that she had custody of and raised my kids, and then she got my son to get braces, my oldest son, just so she could have that control and the proof that like she paid for them, when actually like the benefits, the insurance benefits through my ex through AT&T, like we all have them. I paid for those benefits with my life. The reason he has that job is because what have I worked for and what I've provided. So those benefits paid the majority of my kids' braces, and I paid the majority of my daughter's. There was only a few $100s left that my mother finished paying for when I was near death. And then she wanted those braces put on his teeth so she could have control and power. And she was calling that woman in the background for like the 1.5 to 2 years they were involved, telling them that she's always had custody of them. She raised them. I always had this mental disorder, this drug problem, I'm this mess. She did that so she could actually get, here it is right here, so she could get the signature on the braces form, signing off on them that he could get them off, as if she's really the guardian, because she had been talking that woman up for almost 2 years, telling her all these delusions about me. And then my son still took her the braces paper and got it signed, which at no time should it have ever been. So that was the whole point of that happened in 2022. She's got all this false evidence appearing real, where she's fabricated all this evidence and all this documentation all along the way. So this is still going on, like I said. Then in January 2023, so now I'm already moved down to my house in Ohio. The harassment and the group of people following me around still going on at this time. You have to understand that every time I'm going to work, this is going on, basically from like 2021 to like the beginning of 2024. So this went on this entire time. It's never stopped. And because of the damage to the house, nobody's been able to really find me or insert themselves into my situation. So that's also why I've been receiving all these messages and these people trying to get me to go places with them. And it's people that I do know in real life, and then it's people that I've never met before, and they're just online. So it's both. But they don't realize that I don't operate that way. So they're all dumb. But then in January 2023, so at this point, I'm living at my house in Ohio. I'd been there a few months, been like 5 months or so. My dad took the fall from the scissor lift, 15 feet in the air in the scissor lift. That's where he cracked his head, had the injury. My mother was in California when it happened. I was the one there with him the first 15 months of the injury. I was the one bringing him dinner every night, taking care of him. And she was only there minimally that first 15 months. In the first like 3 months, she wasn't really there at all. So here she'd been lying to people, telling people because I was living at my house in Ohio, telling people that I wasn't even there, wasn't doing any of this, everything that I'd done for him, and I'd been there like almost every night. She was telling people I was off running around Ohio the whole time and that I wasn't doing everything I was doing with my dad, and I was there almost every night bringing him dinner and taking care of him, whereas she wasn't there at all, and she took credit for all the work that I did. And I was sleeping on my friend's couch during the week the majority of that time until I got back into my house. So for about 11 months until I got back into my house here. I slept on my friend's couch during the week so I could get to my dad, and then I'd go home to Ohio on the weekend, and my cousin would come babysit, and I'd go to work on the weekend, and that's how I ran things at that time. And she lied to everybody, and here I was off taking care of him the whole time. And in the meantime, here she was trying to kill him, repeatedly poisoning batches of food. He's getting rushed back to the hospital out the blue, and he's nearly dying so many times because the agenda is to also take all of his assets and the rest of my stolen trust fund, and she's trying to run off and live this rich lifestyle that she pretends to have and be in California for this money she did not work for. So that's what's actually been going on. I've already released videos regarding what was going on with my dad about a year ago. So if you scroll back, there's videos regarding my dad's situation from about a year ago, what she had been doing all along, in poisoning the food and all the rushes back to the hospital and everything she was causing. And then at the beginning of that, I did make a police report in Royal Oak, Michigan, because she sent her sister and her niece to scream her delusions at me the night my dad had the surgery, the night of the fall. And because they've been told a bunch of things that aren't real about me, they act like it is real, and they operate on it, and they have been for decades. It's not new, but I don't know what she changed in her false narrative, but it was something very excessive, that they believe something very excessive happened that I did that I didn't even do. And so that they began screaming delusions at me. So I then went and made a Royal Oak Police Department report on that. And there is a video already up on that as well from about a year ago. So you can go back and scroll back, watch that video. And so this is where the false information in my dad's medical file began. So she starts putting false information about me in my dad's medical file. I did release a video stating what it said, but I have it right here as well. This was at the Royal Oak Beaumont right after his fall, within I'd say like a week or two into his fall. And they state that I tell them that my mother has Munchausen by proxy, and that she's going to try to kill my dad, and that she's brainwashed the entire family, and that that she tried to kill my dad's mother by poisoning her. And that's not what I said. She actually did slowly poison her the last 2 years of her life. And then while she was in the hospital, the last 6 months of her life, she did finish her off and keep it going. And my grandma caught her, is what it was. And then from that point forward, my mother had her sedated until she was deceased. And she freaked out because my grandma caught her, and my grandma was trying to tell me. And so that did happen. It's not, she tried to kill her. That's not what I said. So I also did a whole video on that as well, regarding my grandmother. And my Munchausen mother like contributed to my grandmother's death is what the video is labeled. And I told this woman this, and she put that I appear tangential and delusional, and reported that I hired Charmaine to observe the family and come to the hospital and have a meeting. However, my dad didn't stay there very long, is also the other thing. He kept moving facilities frequently, is what it was, and he kept getting rushed back to the hospital. So everything was very chaotic. She was never able to like come see him, and my mother was creating all these problems that she never actually came, because he was getting switched from facility to facility, all these rushes back to the hospital, and just all this chaos that my mother was creating. So then she types in this letter. This is a piece of my dad's medical file. This is, and there's all false information. So it then says that this lady, her name is Abigail Berlin, that she met with my dad and confirmed that I've always had a mental disorder, or that I have mental health concerns. So those are delusions that my mother's been repeating to him my entire life, because that's not real. Those are delusions. And this is exactly what I was talking about when I told this woman this. And then he says he feels safe with his wife. There's no history of violence. No, it's not physical violence. She puts poison in the food and repeats delusions and causes all this chaos and all these problems and causes all these physical symptoms with her poison batches of food, which at this point, after my dad's injury, it kept bringing him into septic shock and near death. There's already a history long term in his prior medical history with his primary doctor for the years leading up to his injury, because every time he would come to my house, she would poison his batch of food when he'd get home again. So it was going on several times a week, and he kept going to his primary doctor. So there is a history in his actual medical file of all this going on prior to the injury. And then there's more evidence of it in the medical file since his injury, because if you look at all the rushes back to the hospital, it coincides with her poisoning his food. And every time I'd catch her doing something shifty and malicious, that's what she was trying to do to him all along. So you can see a clear pattern of the rushes back to the hospital. And then once I almost got her caught, you can see it all stopped. So there's a very clear pattern there. This is going on in Romulus, Michigan at Special Tree. But at this time, this was written in, so this was at the Royal Oak, Beaumont. And that's why I made the Royal Oak police report and on my mother's sister and niece coming to scream the delusions at me about whatever false information she fed them. So it states on here that they then talked to my mother about all of this. So instead of verifying with Charmaine, which I gave her phone number, it shows it on here. Instead of verifying with her, which is why she was brought in for all this, they verify with my mother, and she then tells them that I have a substance abuse issue and mental health concerns and that I'm delusional. I've always been. So this is all false information. All false information that so she's got this put in his medical file at every hospital since then. So you're talking Vibra Hospital in Taylor, Michigan. You're talking Beaumont Wayne. You're talking U of M Ann Arbor. You're talking Special Tree Spinal Care Facility in Romulus. So all of these facilities have all of this false information about me, and she's the one putting it in there because she does have Munchausen by proxy. She's been poisoning food. I caught her when I was a small child, which is why she's had to lie about me and tell people all these delusions about me all my life. Now, with that, she's also attempting to gain access to my stolen missing trust fund and my dad's assets, and that's part of what's going on. And because she worked in the medical system, she knows how it all works and how to manipulate others to enter the information for her. So it looks like she didn't do any of this. It looks like all these different people are saying this about me. It's her telling them that. They enter it for her. She says she knows what she's talking about because she's the mother. And here, my life has been completely separate for decades. I have nothing to do with this deranged lunatic. My life has been completely separate. Those are all delusions. So that's what's been going on all along. That started at the beginning of 2023 with my dad's injury, still going on in the current day. And that's why I've been banned for almost 2 years from my dad because of all these delusions and false reports. And then, okay, so also at this time, so in February 2023, now I'm getting charged for this setup of the DUI that happened like 7-8 months prior. And so then the attorney that gets put on the case, so I released the Tony Baloney videos. So if you go look at that, so his name's Michael Anthony Carmen. He's involved in all of that. Go watch all those videos. And then the probation officer, Stephanie Pride, tried to set up a false drug test on me. I already released a video on that because they were attempting to lock me up long term, which they did. None of them realized I went and got my own drug test, and I didn't tell anybody. And I was able to 100% back up that she tampered with the drug test. So I've already released videos on both of those people. You can go look at all of those. So then Tony Baloney inserts himself into my life because he's placed where I'm already going to be in court, and then pretends to like date me for some months. But I was already red flagged from the first time I talked to him, and then like the second and the third time and the fourth time I talked to him. So I kept talking to him because I knew what he was doing, and I was just gathering the information. And at this point, I had already been gathering the information from several of these individuals following me around and causing problems for about 2 years. At this point, I'd already been gathering the information. So I continued to talk to him and get all that information. It's all in the videos that I just released. There's 8 parts to the Tony Baloney situation. You can go watch that. And Stephanie Pride and the false drug test. That's all up already on my channel. And then so then Tony carries this out for like 7 months, approximately 7-8 months or so long term, and then realized that Charmaine was actually documenting all his crimes and everything he had done all along. And that's when he told on himself some more and had to hurry up and get rid of me because he knew like what was going on. But then really thought I was naive the whole time and didn't fully understand what I was actually doing or who I really am as a person, because you could tell he was operating on a different page than reality and what I have going on in life and what's going on. He thought I was somebody that I'm not. So he told on himself every step of the way. It's all in those videos. But that went on for a good 7-8 months, all during my dad's injury. So all during the rushes back to the hospital, all these problems, everything that's going on at the same time. And then in the meantime, my mother's in the background spreading this false narrative with all these hospitals, all these facilities, all these places. She's getting all this false information about me put in my dad's medical file repeatedly. So every one of the hospitals I just named is going to have false documentation about me, like having a mental disorder, a substance abuse issue. I'm dangerous. I'm all these things, but it's all false. So she entered all that information fraudulently. And then toward the end of 2023 is when my mother also got a fraudulent power of attorney signed on my dad. And I've already proved it's fraudulent because I made a police report a few days in advance stating he's not able to sign the papers yet. And that we had been talking about it since the beginning of his injury, and there was never one in place. And he never knew he signed them because of the state that he was in the day my mother did this. And then I also released a video regarding the state of his being at that time. And it's on the Detective Mike Ramsey Premises My Mother False Fraud Charges on Me Part 1 video. So if you go to that video, the state of his being is in that video. There's no way he could have known he signed it because of the state he was in at that time. So she got the false power of attorney document signed, where she then signed over his half of the house to herself and moved it into trust for herself. And she didn't tell anybody she did this because she knew the documents were fraudulent. She wasn't using them properly. She didn't get them, take care of financial matters, pay off the debts, assess anything financially. So there's proof of all this because all these months go by and she didn't do any of this from the time she supposedly got these documents signed legitimately. So if you get all these documents together, you can prove what I'm saying is reality. So she never took care of anything financially. All these months go by, like 6 more months go by, 7 months. But here she was, like, behind the scenes. She only presented them to the care facility, and like, I don't think anybody else at that time. But she did it fraudulently without anybody knowing, including my dad. And then she kept trying to finish them off. The poison batches of food, the rushes back to the hospital, they keep going on and on. I'm warning people about it. I'm telling people in advance. I made numerous police reports in advance in Romulus and Royal Oak about this. And it goes on for some time, and it's just like really far out of control, and it was just going on like more than once per week toward the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, and into spring, until I almost got her caught, and then it all just stopped. All those rushes back to hospital stopped. So you can see the records. His medical records will prove what I'm saying. But then now she needs to get me out of there because I'm almost telling on her. So I then get him to sign the power of attorney documents, which we had been talking about since the beginning of his injury, in April of 2024. And that's how she was able to get me banned, because then she's got the entire care facility believing all the delusions she's been telling them about me. They believe I'm this person that I'm not, that I've committed all these crimes, I did all this stuff. None of it's real. That's her. That's all coming out of her mouth. These are all delusions. So they believe that power of attorney that I have is false when hers is false, and I can prove it. So when I got mine signed, she used it to get me banned from there, and tried to act like I did something wrong. But at the time that I finally got mine signed and started presenting it to get matters in order financially and everything going on, that's when she pops up and starts showing all the banks her power of attorney. Oh no, I've had it all along. No, you haven't, you deranged lunatic. If you did, you would have did this months ago when you had it. He wouldn't have all these unpaid debts at this time, because also she attempted to murder him on 1/8/2024. He was totally he had to be resuscitated, and he was unconscious for like over a month. And so I've already released videos on this. So if you watch the 1/7/24 conversation with my dad, and you watch the videos around that time where I'm talking about all this, she attempted to finish him off. She almost succeeded. And then 10 days later, she moved his 401k into trust for herself, when he was completely out of it. And then I have texts between the two of them. So if you watch the video where I read all the different texts between the two of them and the malicious phone calls and the things that she's saying and doing, you can tell that she was never supposed to touch his money. He told her this when he was fully with it. So you can tell everything adds up. All these pieces of the puzzle add up to the bigger picture of what's been going on. And she moved that money into trust for herself, didn't assess any debts or anything. So then this is January 2024. I get the power of attorney signed in the third week of April 2024. That's when she starts presenting the documents to the banks and such. Now, at this time, I had already presented them to the bank, and I'm here trying to get matters in order. At the same time, I had made numerous Romulus police reports in advance also. They did not take me seriously. She told them I have a mental disorder. They restated that in the report. And, oh, yeah, no, she's just got a mental disorder. She's delusional. And then during that time, then I was banned like from both banks, and she's trying to get false fraud charges on me through Romulus and Brownstown. That's where Detective Mike Ramsey gets brought into the situation, where he's involved in the criminal group long term and helping gain access to the rest of my trust fund. That's also who brought in Tony Baloney into the situation as well. And so Detective Mike Ramsey promises my mother false fraud charges on me as long as she gets custody of my dad in probate court. So now, what I did with that money, I pulled $600 from their joint account to fix the vehicle that's technically in her name, but the vehicle my dad had been driving, that my daughter has been driving since my dad's injury, it's in their name. I wouldn't be putting my money into it. It needs $800 and some dollars worth of work. I only took $600, and then they shut the account down because she's trying to tell me I stole all this money, which I didn't. And then at the same time, I took $20-something $100 from his bank account that her name is not on, that they viewed me as power of attorney, and that money was taken to hire him an attorney. So the attorney's name that I hired is on the money orders. Specifically, it's not made out to me. It's made out to the attorney, and there's an additional money order from my bank separately because it was more than what I took. So that money went to the attorney. He cashed them, and then he never filed the paperwork. And I had to file a complaint with the Attorney Grievance Commission, and the Brownstown police wrote false reports on me, and so did Romulus, stating that I took all this money. That not that the attorney stole the money in Brownstown at the one account. They wrote it up as if I took the money. So no, I didn't take the money. The truck is still not fixed. The place still has the deposit. The attorney did steal the money. So these were all delusions, but they're all in on getting access to the rest of my missing stolen trust fund. And they're using like all these circumstances to gain access to the rest of my missing stolen trust fund. But at the same time, here I am just operating in reality, taking care of business matters and all these matters financially, all these different things. I'm taking care of everything in reality, living life in reality. And here she is. Oh no, she did this. Oh, she's a thief. She's a mental disorder drug addict. Oh, she this. Oh, she that. And she's over here flapping her jaw to all these places when I can prove she's committed all these crimes. I'm literally living life in reality, trying to take care of matters so life can flow. And she's literally doing this to gain access to the rest of the trust fund, and these people are all helping her so they can have a piece of the pie too, which they've all been involved long-term helping her. So that's what's actually going on during all this, and there's all this running around. My dad's coming near death. Then I get banned from the facility over this. Now this is in Romulus. And so then now I just noticed yesterday or 2 days ago that Romulus actually wrote a false report on me stating that I admitted to stealing the $600 and I took it to fix my house. My house had over 100 grand in damage. That is not what I said on the phone. So I'm gonna make a separate video on that because I did not state that in the previous video. But she twisted the words I said, took out many of the words that I said, and put that I admitted to stealing. Basically, she's admitting that I admitted I steal the money to fix my house, is what she put in the police report, and that's not at all what I said. So Romulus wrote an entire false report, and then the other report I made, that guy also wrote that I have the mental disorder due to my mother just telling him that, and he believed it. And because of my many brain injuries and the running around and how injured and sick I am, he thinks that what he saw is a mental disorder, and because of what's coming out of my mouth, that it's a mental disorder. When no, these are physical injuries that I've been living with for years. Like I just showed you the stack of receipts a little bit ago. I've been under treatment all this time, still under treatment at that time. And what you're seeing is the effects of my brain injury and my injuries not being treated properly, me being chronically sick, permanently injured from my mother's escapades and crimes. And what I'm telling you sounds delusional because you don't want to believe somebody's mother's out here doing what I'm telling you she's been doing for decades. So all those false reports, I made videos on the Romulus reports already. I'm going to make another one on what I noticed that officer wrote about me stealing the money when I didn't steal the money. I don't know how you think $600 would make any type of dent in the damage, over $100,000 in damage done to my home. And then in that video, I'm also going to show the homeowner's insurance checks and the dates they were sent to me and what was going on. So you can prove that I didn't steal any of the money from my dad, because I'm sitting on like $68,000. That's not include the money I made at work, my tax returns, and the money I make doing other people's taxes. So there's additional money that's not even being counted, but I'm going to show the receipts for just the homeowner's insurance claim because it proves I didn't take any money. So these are all delusions. All these people are feeding off each other, making false reports on me. It's possible some of the officers in Romulus have taken payment to write these false reports. I'm not sure. Now that is all going on, and at the same time, all these reports are being made at all these care facilities and hospitals where I'm banned from all of them. And then, for some time, because like I said, I've been working on the house. The major work started the first week of June 2024. Even though I started the work January 2024, the major work did not start until June. So this is now February 2026, and I'm putting on the finishing touches now. There was a second round of a whole bunch more money that came during 2025. So what I'm talking about is the first large round of money that came during 2024, but I didn't get the abundance of money to start the major work until the first week of June 2024. So that's when those reports were made that I supposedly stole all this money. Although I did receive about, there's a little over 20 grand that I had received between January and June. So it proves that I didn't steal the money. I will do that video next. So Romulus is now involved, and they're also involved in not taking any of my reports seriously. My dad's repeated rushes back to the hospital, which all prove that I said she's poisoning food, because the pattern is very clear. And if you line up the pattern of his primary doctor's reports prior to the injury for all those years, right into the injury, and then everything stops once she gets me removed and I almost get her caught, it proves my point. It proves that's what's going on. So all of this is going on with my dad. I've been banned from the facility. Everybody at Special Tree believes all the delusions about me, believes I'm this liar, this drug addict, this thief. I did all these things when I can prove she's committed all these crimes. So now at the same time, here I'm working on all this work on the house. It was major work for the first, so from June of 2024, June, July, August, September, major work going on in here. So we got basically the whole main floor restored. There's videos up under the playlist labeled the over $100,000 in damage done to my home. There's videos on it after demo. There's 6 short videos, and then there's 3 50% done videos on there as well. So you can see, and I state the date in the videos, you can see what I have going on, what's going on in my life in reality, not the delusions my mother's telling people, because this house was supposed to be producing income in 2022, and I should have been moved into my next house. The house in Ohio shouldn't exist. These are her crimes and her false reports and the harassment and the delusions. So there shouldn't have been damage to the house. This house should have been turned into the Airbnb, and I should have been moved on to my next house that I live in. And then now where we are today, because so much time has gone on, I should be working on the next house, and that house should already be an Airbnb as well. So this is a deranged lunatic who's caused extreme destruction. All these people have helped her all along the way. Now, also the people that wrote false reports on me at the Taylor Vibra were Makia Moore and Celesta Washington. They helped my mother participate in those crimes as well. Pretty much every Special Tree care facility employee in Romulus has also participated in writing false reports in my dad's records and banning me from the facility on all these lies and delusions. Now, when my mom moved the house into trust and the stolen money, which some of that money that she moved into trust for herself is also money she's collected throughout my stolen missing trust fund along the way as well. So some of that money is mine. It is at Shea Law with Jamie Fergus is the one who helped her. And that woman did not want to believe what I was telling her when I eventually reached her by phone in April of 2024. And then also in April of 2024, I spoke with Megan Kinder of Adult Protective Services, and my mother also manipulated her into believing all these delusions and helping participate in the fraudulent probate court case. I'm getting custody of my dad. And then also the false Romulus reports and the false Brownstown reports from Detective Ramsey and I think it was Officer Kristen Tolax. Those reports were taken to probate court and used fraudulently. So those reports are fraudulent. Then they were taken to probate court in Wayne County, used fraudulently to gain custody of my dad. So they're promising all these fraud charges on me. So I do long-term prison time or jail time, and then they'd be able to gain access to the rest of my stolen trust fund. These people are all involved in that. And then with the probate court attorney that I hired my dad, his name is John O'Napman. He's the one who stole the money. And then also, Mohammed Bazi was the attorney in probate court with my dad at that time, the guardian ad litem, and the judge is Terrence A. Keith. He's allowed this to go on in his courtroom. There's been many other court dates since then, and he allowed this to go on in his courtroom. I'm not sure if he's actually involved or if he's just allowing it to happen. But all the court documents pertaining to the probate situation, those are all fraudulent, submitted fraudulently from the police reports that were fraudulent. And nobody's investigating this because there's just so many people involved, and they're all involved. Now, the additional court dates pertaining to me trying to go back and get custody of my dad in probate court in 2025. So There is David Braxton. He recently became an attorney. His dad is a long-term judge in Detroit. He also participated by not taking anything I said seriously, and then he called my mother, operates on the delusions, and continues forward. Enters false information, continues forward. Also, January 2026, Michelle Mack is the attorney guardian ad litem. Same thing. She does the same thing, enters false information. They continue on forward with all this false information. So all of these people are connected to each other. All these people participated. These are RICO crimes. This is organized, calculated RICO crimes. All of them are involved. Also, I have tried to contact the Brownstown prosecutor, Dean Robinette. I have left a 3-minute message for him a few months back, and I have myself recorded leaving that message. I never received a call back from him. I then placed another call to him, I want to say about a month ago, spoke with the secretary. He also never called me back from that situation. So this man also believes I have this long-term mental disorder issue or drug problem or whatever. And he also refuses to call me back about any of these crimes that have all gone on in Brownstown, because a lot of these crimes have happened in Brownstown over the course of the last 26 years. So he refuses to call me back. So I now assume he is also involved in this as well and has possibly taken payments from my stolen trust fund as well. Many of these people are involved. This is just so far out of control. It's literally been non-stop. So pretty much from 2018 to current day, non-stop, all piggybacking off each other, all these situations going on at once. We're talking 4 to 8 situations, all this harassment, all these angles going on at one time from 2018 to the current day in 2026 as I'm filming this. This has all been going on nonstop. Nonstop. This is why my life has completely stopped. I'm backed into a corner and I can't make any further moves because all of these people have created all these problems for me, and they're all attempting to gain access to the rest of my missing stolen trust fund. Some of them have already taken payments from it. They've all been made promises of future payment once it's in their hands, and they've all participated. These are 100% RICO crimes. All of these people need to be investigated. My mother is at the root of all of this, and it's not going to stop. Like I had to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy at the beginning of 2024 after the damage to the house happened. That happened due to the involvement of Sergeant Matthew Wilchinski in the Flat Rock Police Department. The guy at the postmaster at the Flat Rock Post Office played a role in that, and the person who did the damage played a role in that because she threw away the checks. Now, because I can't make police reports and Matthew Wilchinski refuses to do his job, and because the guy at the post office wouldn't hold my mail when I said she already threw away the checks, I'm waiting on another one, and he allowed the mail to continue to come here so she could continue to throw away the checks. That's what led to my bankruptcy. That's what led to my Chapter 13 bankruptcy. All of these circumstances led to my Chapter 13 bankruptcy. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So this all ties together. And now I'm under Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and my income has been completely disrupted because this house should have been producing 8 to 11 grand a month from 2022 forward, and I should be in a different home, and I shouldn't own the home in Ohio. This has all been going on. All these people participated in this. And during the Ford spill, there was a lady in charge of that at the top of Ford. Her name is Christine. I can't remember her last name. She also participated in this. Charmaine also had a phone conversation with her at that time as she was getting ready to cut my hotel off, and she believed I really had this mental disorder, and my son and I were never injured. So all of these people are involved. Each person and agency plays a role. In the next video, I'm going to name every single person and every agency that's been involved from the time my mother began these crimes to the current day. I'm just going to name a whole list of them all. And then I will also be doing the video on the lady, I believe it was Officer Reyna in Romulus, who wrote the false report on me, basically making it look like I admitted to stealing $600 when at no time did I ever do that. She twisted what I said and rewrote it to fit her needs. And then there's Corporal Farhat also in Romulus, who also wrote that I have a mental disorder in the Romulus police report that I made in advance of all the crimes happening. And now I've made these reports in advance, and everything I said was going to happen has now happened. So how could I possibly write all this stuff in advance? Same with the probate court. I also sent emails to some of these people that I just named involved in the probate court situation in advance of what's been going on and what's going to happen. And I'm able to call it in advance, and I can prove it. So I have those as well. They're all time and date stamped. I have more than enough proof to make arrests. All of these people have been involved, and they're all attempting to gain access to the rest of my missing stolen trust fund. So I do need the FBI or the DOJ or the Attorney General's office in Michigan to begin looking into this. Separately, I will be doing separate videos and mailing many departments the videos and what needs to be looked into so investigations can start, because the online systems are not formatted to submit any of this, and not just the online systems, but like in person, I also cannot report it because nobody wants to believe something to this degree is going on, especially because there's so many high level officials with power involved. So I will be back with more. Thanks. Bye.